All right, so have you heard of Micro 64? No? Wow, that's coming right up. Well, we're at the 2016 NACAT convention in Pasadena, Texas. I'm here in the Electronic Specialties booth with Steve White, and he's got something really important to tell us about. And so, Steve, tell us about this Micro 64. I know you got a test kit for it, but why is that important?
Well, with Micro 64, it's used, it's a connector style used on General Motors and Benz, and also I heard Nissan and some others are starting to use it. It's a very small connector pin, so it actually stands for 0.64 millimeter. So it's one of the very smallest pins used in automotive connectors. With regards to some of our other test kits that we introduced last year, we started getting quite a few calls and found that those types of connectors were kind of having some issues. So I researched it, looked into it, and found that there was a need for that type of connector fitting for testing, making adapters for testing and whatnot. And what I found was, when I researched it, I found that General Motors says, and here's your Micro 64 type ECM connector.
And I looked at that thing, and those are really, really, really small connectors, guys.
What I've heard is that General Motors says no more than 3 disconnects from the ECM on this connector. After the third one, they want it replaced. So these are very sensitive connections, very precise and small, and so when we put this in here, it makes a snug fitting, but not too tight, and you can actually
You can kind of like feel the resistance.
You can feel the resistance, and from what I understand, it's called a drag test.
Drag
so you can
test.
actually use these.
A drag test,
Yes.
right?
Yes, drag test.
Okay.
So you can actually put it down in there, and you can feel a nice resistance, not too tight, but snug enough for good electrical fitting.
Right.
So anyway, these come in square. This is the square type, Micro 64, and also round. So there's 2 styles, round and square, and it's very important that you have the right fitting on this type of connection, especially with what GM is saying about no more than 3 disconnects. They're uber sensitive about what's going into these types of connectors.
So if you get the wrong one, it may not fit, but it might ruin it too?
Yes, and if you're not using, say you've got a test connector set that's not really set up for the Micro 64, you could damage those pins, spread one out too far, and the whole connector is messed up.
Okay,
Good
good
to
know.
know. With the connections, I think what they're seeing is that if they don't have a snug and tight fit, then you have the connector with possibly giving some intermittent readings to the PCM from the sensors. And then you're seeing out-of-range readings, so that you're having that type of problem that could cause drivability. So that's really important to have the right setup.
Okay, and so from a service standpoint, what vehicles are we talking about? In other words, how far back do we go? Is this just the brand newest stuff, or do we go back a few years?
From what I understand, General Motors has been using it for the last 5 or 6 years on quite a wide variety. Trucks, commercial vehicles, and automobiles. And then Benz, I'm not as familiar with Benz. I think it's newer with Benz, but I know I've received some sample fittings from one of my friends who sent me the actual Benz OEM parts for these pins. So I would think the last 3 or 4 years with them as well.
All right, but even so, the last 5 or 6 years with GM, you guys are definitely going to run into this stuff sooner or later, and you're going to see these really, really little guys. So be sure you check this stuff out.